I'm afraid you're in the wrong compartment, sir.
That's a first-class compartment, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Well, then I'm all right.
This is a third-class ticket, sir.
And what sort of line is this, selling third-class tickets at first-class prices?
I'm very sorry, sir. That will be 5 and 4 pence extra, sir.
You haven't changed my fiver, have you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, then don't bother, because I haven't got one.
Ah, there.
That's the best I can do. Now, do you suppose the line would settle for 5 and 2 halfpenny? No, I don't suppose it would. I hate to presume on our short acquaintance, but have you any change?
Well, I'm afraid that I'm...
Oh, there you are. That'll do. That stamp. Now, thank you very much. There we are. 5 and 2 halfpenny and 3 halfpence, 5 and 4 pence. Oh, it's legal tender, old boy. Legal tender. Write to your mother.
Do you expect me to talk?
Episode 253 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm Becca, and as always, joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
All right. Yeah, good. Enjoyed it. Oh, I haven't long finished watching this, so the film will announce in a minute. But yeah, so I'm still very fresh for me.
That's a very civil introduction to tonight's show, isn't it?
Yes, I'm excellent. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bean.
Mind you, there's a lot of that in the film, actually, but we'll come to it. What are we covering tonight, Becca?
Yes, tonight, I'm going to call you all monkey face, because tonight we are reviewing 1941's Suspicion, starring no George Sanders this time, so I'm disappointed.
It nearly was, though, or was...
He very nearly was, this is it. But no, instead, starring Cary Grant in his first film with Hitchcock, Joan Fontaine, yet again falling for another mysterious man. Will she ever learn? Also starring Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Nigel Bruce, Dame May Whitty, aka Miss Froy in The Lady Vanishes, Leo G. Carroll, and Faith Brooke. I have to mention her because, as well as Cary Grant being in the proto-Bond, North by Northwest, there's also a Bond connection. She played the Prime Minister, who's basically Maggie Thatcher, in 1980s action thriller North Sea Hijack, which also starred famously Tony Perkins and Sir Roger Moore.
Sir Roger Moore, yeah.
Role. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So Roger Moore did 2 films where he had like
Maggie Thatcher within a year.
Yeah. I mean, she's like the Prime Minister, but it's
no, he was a Tory. Maybe he fancied her. He tells, any chance we can get Maggie Thatcher in this? Yeah.
Dear, oh dear. Anyway, yes, with the score by Franz.
And it was the Bond film where he got like he's sort of like a buffoon dentist sort of reaching for a cookie or something, wasn't it?
And getting a slap.
Yeah.
Was that For Your Eyes Only?
Yeah.
He goes to eat a
and
sprout.
she's like, not now, Dennis.
Give us a kiss. Give us a kiss.
Give us a kiss. Like, oh God, dear, oh dear. And she's like, oh really? Yeah, the score by Franz Waxman. I feel we need Charlie to tell us all about Franz Waxman, but I'll try to do that later on in the show.
He films on Waxman.
Yes, films on Waxman. That's it.
Yes.
Script by Simon Raffleson, Joan Harrison, Alma Revel, aka Mrs. Hitchcock, based on famously Before the Fact by Anthony Barclay, writing as Francis Isles. Released in 1941 and obviously directed by Hitchcock.
Yeah, did you mention, you probably did because you read a lot of names then, did you mention Leo G. Carroll?
I did.
Because I'm there going, I know this guy. Well, it turns out I know him from loads of things.
He popped up in quite a few things.
Well, he was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and several of the spin-off films and stuff. But
famously, yes, he was the lead, wasn't he? He was like the head honcho.
But he's in North by Northwest, obviously. He's in lots of Hitchcock films, but that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, he pops up in quite a few things. Look him up. He's got an incredible filmography.
He doesn't look any different 18 years later in that film.
No, he doesn't.
He's like the governor of the Bank of England from Goldfinger. It's just like stays the same age.
Exactly. You instantly, as soon as you see him, you instantly recognise him. He looks the same. Yeah. Like he doesn't age. Same with like Cedric Hardwicke though. He's one of those kind of well-known character actors. Like he looks the same in most of his films.
No, the thing with Leo G. Carroll, he's like, I don't mean this in a negative way, but he's eminently open to being caricatured. He looks like a cartoon.
He's got that kind of almost cartoony face. No shade on it at all.
Yeah, no, not at all.
He obviously had quite a distinctive look about him, and obviously used that to his advantage to become a prolific character actor. Yeah. So rightly so, definitely. So a little bit. Obviously, I picked this film again into the 1940s, which is like a pivotal, as we said on previous episodes, pivotal era for Hitchcock in his career. Obviously, famously, this is the first film that Hitchcock and Cary Grant would make together. There's a really fascinating interview about sort of the relationship between Hitchcock and Cary Grant, which I think is available for free on YouTube. After this episode goes out, I'll be sure to share it because I think it's really interesting.
Well, if you remind Chris can put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. I hope it's still available. But it was a free lecture that was released under Joe Knockdown, for example. But yeah, I'll be sure to provide a link to that because it's really fascinating. If for someone like me who didn't quite know the connections between them, they're really, really fascinating, I think. I sort of like picked this one as well. I think I mentioned in a previous episode, obviously like in the 1940s, there was that film noir trope. So like Gaslight, Suspicion, Rebecca, Shadow of a Doubt, etc. Rich sort of critic Emmanuel Levy basically coined "Don't trust your husband." There's kind of like a rich, sheltered woman, usually in some Victorian or Edwardian setting, is basically
often moved into a home
rich stranger.
Often moved into a large home that's a bit overbearing as well.
Haunted, sort of noirish. Sort of
Not
home.
that this house is reasonably modern for its time. I think there's plenty of light in it, but it is still a big place that's not hers.
There becomes a point where it does kind of all go against her, essentially, which I never noticed till today because I'm quite ignorant, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's on the Hitchpod that I mentioned it. I think that's a really good title for it. I mean, it's obviously they didn't set out to make these kind of "Don't Trust Your Husband" films, but yeah, it's basically it kind of brings like horror into the home. Really, it's usually kind of a place of safety, security, and it becomes a trap. Dun, dun, dun. And it's quite shocking. Obviously, that will become a trope for the horror movies later on. So instead of having it in Frankenstein's laboratory, or Dracula's castle, for example, it kind of brought it into a domestic setting, which is probably quite shocking for their time. Yeah. But these films kind of share the same sort of like visual cues and sort of narrative styles and that as well.
But again, you've also got the element, and we saw this with Rebecca, and Chris actually shared last night a clip of Tarantino on like a podcast.
Yes.
It was a filmed one. You could see him speaking. It was only about 4 minutes, and he was saying, now the headline would be he doesn't like Hitchcock, but that's actually misleading. He thinks Hitchcock was a genius filmmaker. He thinks he was just constrained by his times, and that if he'd been he actually says if he'd been the same age in the 70s as he'd been in the 50s, I think I'd have warmed to it a lot more, because he said he's constrained by the sort of morals and the Hays Code and things like that.
Yeah, you kind of was sort of strung up by Hays Code, I think.
What I don't think he's saying, because it would be easy for those who maybe aren't Tarantino fans to go, oh, he just wants a load of blood and gore in it. He's not saying that.
Not necessarily, no.
No, he's explicitly not saying that. He's saying that in the third act of films is where he normally loses it with him, because he's having to pull punches and change things. And he's done it with this film in much the same way he did with his version of Rebecca. But he picks this film as an example of where it works for it. And we can get into the details of that in a bit. But this film has a different focus from the same story in the book. And the guilt or otherwise of the Cary Grant character is again somewhat different, or at least it's presented differently, but it's almost like a fudge. It's almost to give, well, no, he's still the hero. Look, he didn't do it.
It's a bit of a cop-out almost, isn't it, I would say?
Yeah, but it's a cop-out film masterly that you're still left, and Tarantino actually explains why, and we'll mention it as well. Almost the final shot of the film is
like on paper, it reads like a cop-out, but in practice, because Cary Grant is just such a fucking arsehole throughout the entire film.
Yeah, he's not the best.
It's like when he comes out, it's like, oh no, I've not done all these things. Actually, in your head you're thinking, bollocks. Absolute bollocks.
Well, we'll talk
Absolutely
about
rubbish.
there's several such occasions. It's like, oh, I got 200 quid from there, and then it's like, no, I got 2,000 from there, and then you find that 2,000 is from somewhere else. And every time he's like, I have some presents, and there's a cringe-making scene we must point to, where him and his friend are talking to her and trying to cheer her up, and it's just cringe-making.
It's
So in all the best ways.
Check your chin.
Yeah.
How about
some faces? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is a guy who's just like got away with everything on charm for so long. But yeah, so you chose this film because it sort of fits in with a lot of things. And funnily enough, watching it in the first half, I wasn't really feeling like I was watching a Hitchcock film. In the second half, I very much was, and it fitted with things like Rebecca and what we've just seen.
Yeah, it started on that trope, really. I just think it's quite interesting. It's not. Nothing in this podcast is going to be new, sort of revelatory, unfortunately. Just because I'm a fan and I just like to enthuse and effuse if I can. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like something Hitchcock was known for was kind of really subverting the image of like his sort of leading ladies or his leading men, for example. This is a good example. Also, obviously Tony Peck as well in Psycho. Yeah. But I think by this point, like obviously Cary Grant, he had just this incredible career. I think he's working pretty much every year throughout like this decade. I think certainly on this one, like perhaps he might have had a difficult time making it. Didn't really get on with Joan Fontaine, and then considering it was their first experience together, really, they were like, "Oh, we're not going to work together again." But obviously they would go on to make a few more films together. So we all know that obviously they famously made up and would go on and continue their working relationship. But yeah, no, I think it's one of those really interesting ones for me. I would kind of agree with you. It's kind of it's difficult when it comes to adapting, because it's not kind of like pure Hitchcock novel. But I think he does kind of, has to bend to the senses a little bit. But there was that whole thing where I think obviously Cary Grant he was very much kind of a romantic hero, and this film very much shows him. Yeah, he's a total ass in this film. He's a sort of gambler. He's addiction issues. He's lies through his teeth. All whilst looking very, very handsome, very charming. Butter wouldn't melt, but actually he's a bastard. But yeah, it's one of those things where he still kind of. The only reason is that he had to sort of cop out was obviously he didn't want his public image as a hero, a sort of romantic hero, to really kind of be tarnished. Because he sort of really wouldn't be bankable otherwise. And there was some issue over like basically if they cut out all the moments that showed Cary Grant's character to be kind of like menacing or quite dangerous, the film would be like 5 minutes long or something like that. But yeah, I just think that's one of those interesting points whereby you've already kind of got this. It's quite prolific career by this point, trying to forge himself into sort of a romantic hero, and already Hitchcock is kind of trying to undo that, trying to flip it a little bit or show a different side to how versatile he could be. And that obviously would lead to greater things, obviously playing characters like John Roby, also Adment, for example, I forgot the name of his character, in North by Northwest, and again, and sort of,
his character, Roger Thornhill.
That was it. Roger Thornhill, that was it.
George Kaplan is the sort
George Kaplan, this is it.
It's well, we won't explain that because not everyone listening to this will have seen it yet.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there.
He keeps being. Everyone thinks he's a guy called George Kaplan, and we'll explain that.
And he's not. And he's actually Roger Thornhill. But is he Kaplan? We don't know.
I was going to say, don't give anything away.
Just sort of playing characters with a bit of mystique behind them. Maybe not 100% on the level. But certainly at this point in his career as well, he was still very much kind of, romantic lead, romantic hero.
He's not fully formed yet, is he? His screen persona is, but this is the first time I've heard him. It's still his voice.
Oh, really?
It's the first time I've heard him. Let me finish the sentence. It's not I haven't been watching him for years with the sound on.
With the sound on.
I prefer to just read him. Right? Put the subtitles on. I quickly switch it back on if another.
Just stare at photos and just.
Yeah, I didn't want to ruin the illusion. In fact, I just play Tony Curtis from Some Like It Hot while I watch him. No, I'm saying it's the first time.
Laugh. Sorry, I do apologise.
It's the first time I've heard him without the fully formed sort of slightly transatlantic elongated accent that he's known for.
Yeah, he sounds a bit different here, doesn't he?
Now, some people who've watched Cary Grant films might never have thought about it, and in fact, I didn't think about it until I watched Some Like It Hot and thought, what the hell is Tony Curtis doing there? And someone went, that's meant to be Cary Grant. I'm like, oh, all right.
You can also
But
listen to Frankie Matthews doing
it-
Captain Scarlet, as
it's
obviously
the
loosely
same-
based on Cary Grant.
It's the same voice, but it's more clearly English, and it's an English accent rather than sort of English, sort of American, and it's a bit more clipped. So his speech pattern's a bit shorter and quicker.
Yeah, he's still kind of just on the erring on the side of RP. I mean, he doesn't really have the like Bristolian accent.
It's still him.
That's
It
hard to
doesn't
get
sound.
rid
It still sounds like him, but it's almost like a different line reading for everything.
Yeah, it's like we read everything in more sort of like clipped RP style.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I would kind of agree. He does sound different to how you would do in 20 years' time, say. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting. It's still kind of quite early on in his career.
Although
yeah.
he's about 37 when this is released. That's the funny thing when we get to North by Northwest, because that was meant to be Jimmy Stewart.
Yes.
And Jimmy Stewart is, you can still put it in your fun facts because it's weeks away, people will forget.
Oh.
But it was meant to be Jimmy Stewart, but when Vertigo sort of was deemed to have slightly underperformed, he thought it was that Jimmy Stewart was looking a bit too old.
Yeah.
So he put Cary Grant in it, who's 4 years older than Jimmy Stewart, but he just aged so well.
But he looks fantastic.
He
though.
was born
I
in 1904. This is 1941, which is far from ancient. But again, 37 in 1941 is very different from 37 now.
Yeah, we were sort of having this debate that sort of people age a bit more differently, and also perception of age as well. I mean, kind of like certainly around this time, certainly if you're a woman, perhaps if you're sort of coming around sort of middle age, I guess, then you're kind of on the shelf a little bit. But obviously, Cary Grant famously had a very long career. Was very handsome. But there's recently we released a 4K restoration of North by Northwest. Which I think has been screened this year. I think I saw it last year at the BFI. Then
It was already pretty nicely restored. To be
yeah, it was
fair.
already really excellent restoration. But it's given that 4K upgrade. And the way I can describe it was a little bit from Anchorman, is that he was carved out of rich mahogany. Like he looks like he'd had a bath in like teak oil. Like, he just looked really tanned.
Was he wearing London Gentleman?
Stings the nostrils. But no, I don't like in that film in 4K. I don't think either Cary Grant nor his suit has ever looked so good. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and again, just to reiterate, he was in his mid-50s at that point.
Yeah, I think he did very well.
And yet, if someone said, right, he's going to be the first James Bond to do a couple of Bond films, you would have gone, yeah, right. And
Yes,
there's not many actors you could say that about.
It's hard to picture him as a Bond, though. I don't know if that's because after the fact, but...
Of course it is, but because North by Northwest has several things in common with From Russia with Love.
I can't really imagine Jimmy Stewart as Bond, though.
I put it this way: I never picture him in like Goldfinger, but I do picture him on the train in From Russia with Love. And
yeah, definitely. Or like Thunderball, for example. Maybe.
Thunderball, maybe. I'm not saying I'd have wanted that.
Maybe they're more kind of like close to like spy.
I'm saying
spy dramas rather than
there is a world where he would have got away with it for a couple of years in his late 50s, and I can't think of an actor that could do that.
No, he kind of had that style and sort of looked, and didn't he? Obviously kept himself very fit and very physical as well. As a North by Northwest, obviously we'll discuss it when we get there, but it demanded quite a lot of him. It was quite a physical role, and also traded a lot like on his looks and his persona at the time. But anyway, shall we move away from North by Northwest, even though we love it so much?
Yeah. I'll just do some opening thoughts on it then, really, on this. We'll obviously get into the plot in a minute, although it's a fairly straightforward plot, but it's a plot that takes a while to reveal itself as being in any way, not suspicious, because it's always suspicious, but in any way potentially macabre, and like murderers and all the rest of it. Basically, the first... I didn't do a time check, I should have done, but the first, 50 minutes plus of this film is just, she's married to an unreliable asshole. She meets a guy on a train. She looks very sort of buttoned up on that train in a way she doesn't thereafter. She looks very spinsterish on the train, but she doesn't thereafter. And she meets this guy. He thinks he's meant to be in first class. So that's your first clue. He's got a third class ticket and sort of.
He's already some kind of shyster, isn't he? He's already some kind of dodgy.
And then she happens to be reading the London Picture News or something, which is a strange thing, isn't it? Is she illiterate or something? It's like
it's upside down.
I could do the news if it's in pictures. It is. She's reading like London Picture News or something, and he's in it at some event, Then it's at some rich event, and he's at that as well, and seems to be known to everybody. And then he sort of disappears. He's known. Her parents seem quite well-to-do and well off, and she knows the family he's from. And it's like he's a bit of a cad, Poor Tom, I think he said.
Could be George Sand.
Yeah, I might be going a bit quick here, but yeah, there's a short meeting on a train. Then she meets him again. She overhears her parents suggest she'll always be a spinster, and so she's immediately wanting to prove them wrong. I don't want to race through the entire plot in one bit. What would you say? That's sorry, we're going to get more into the plot in a minute. Sorry, I was going to do first thoughts. So that's the setup for the film. But yeah, the first I sort of drifted from saying how the film started to unfold to giving you the whole film. I didn't really mean to do that. But the first 50 minutes,
you get good value for money on this podcast.
The first 50 minutes of the film or so, could be an hour, could be 40 minutes, can't quite remember. It's only a 95-minute film anyway. But the potentially over half of it is just she meets this guy, falls in love with him, then finds out he's a bit of a loser, money financially, doesn't have a job, and then it's like she thinks something of him and then finds out something else. A friend tells her one thing, he will lie to your face, but says it like that's a good thing, like he's quite a character. There's nothing in that. The suspicion of that, when the film and its trailers and everything else would have probably sold heavily on the glass of milk and the is he trying to kill me, isn't really there. You're just watching a woman being sort of a mixture of gaslit, but then being begged for forgiveness and actually starting to almost see herself as the problem. You could have called this film gaslight in modern parlance quite easily. And it isn't really until the latter half of the film the suspicion really ramps up. And that bit of the film is superb. The first bit of the film I enjoyed just fine. I think the sheer brass neck of him being such an asshole and then looking her in the face and still being charming, Cary Grant, was really good. But it's the second half when suddenly the lighting does start to change and the place does feel more austere and remote, and she feels more isolated, that it suddenly does become sort of a bit of a suspicion masterclass. And with Tarantino on this, the way they actually treat his guilt or otherwise, not just on paper, but how he chooses to film it and the sort of final scenes of the film, I think are really, really good. So if you'd have stopped this halfway through and said, what do you think? I would have said, well, it feels Hitchcock era, and it obviously feels Hitchcock cast. I'm not sure how Hitchcock this feels. It's a bit on the nose in some respects. But yeah, the sort of final act or so of the film I think is really masterful. So whether it's the best we've seen, no, I think I preferred Rebecca to this, but I really like it.
Yeah, I like, though I do have a bit of a two minds about it. I think one of the key things why I can't really get on board with it is I just do not buy how much she falls for him. Because he's such a insufferable prick. Like, I get the initial
attraction and the proving the parents wrong.
Yeah, I get that, because beyond that, she's just like, oh God, this guy's just pestering me. And it's like, just she overhears her parents going, oh, you're going to be a spinster? And it's like, right, fine then. But, so I can get like the relationship being almost kind of like begrudging. But
I can even get the initial spark because he sees her and then he disappears for a week.
Yeah.
And then says he's going to meet her at a ball that he has no invitation to, we find out. And I can see that he's almost gone away just at the moment she's decided she does want to like try this with him. And then she's now got a week to romanticize him and build up seeing him again at a ball. And he's given it an air of mystery by disappearing for a week. I get it that far.
Yeah.
But as the film goes through, I mean, there's a bit in the film later, which I won't spoil now, where I would have thought, now, this is the one point where it's stretching credibility. She should be walking out at this point.
Yeah, it's just the misty eye kind of like how she gets lost, and I'm like, I'm not quite getting it. Because he does some very untrustworthy things, like, he I say, he gaslights her. He puts her down, calls her monkey face, which which on the face of it sounds almost like a little bit endearing, but when it comes about, it does, and how it first turns up, it's like, that's a bit of an insult, like, isn't it?
It's a minimising remark at very, very, very least. I think it's strange because at the one point she's told, if you make him uncomfortable on something you know to be a lie, watch him make up another lie really quickly. But that's said like endearingly. We'll explain that in a minute, how someone could say that endearingly. But on the other hand, when it's like, I don't work, he's quite brazen about that. So he's a mixture of lying to her and telling her the truth and going, what's your problem with that?
Yeah.
So she doesn't know where she is at any given moment. But I would say that almost for the reason you just said and the lack of sort of suspense, that's what makes the second half of the film much better, because by the second half of the film, you just buy she's that far gone that she's going to try to forgive him for things and blame herself and doubt herself. In the first half of the film, you're going, walk away. Yeah.
I know. But I think, and I will add somewhat in what I think may have added to this in terms of casting. It's Cary Grant. And I know the fact that Cary Grant was quite a big popular star at the time. He was like he was always a good man. He didn't play any villainous roles, did he? Really, as far as I'm aware. So
I don't want to commit to that without thinking about it, but my best guess would be you're probably right.
Yeah. At least going off what in terms of popular opinion is. Or what's generally said.
The worst you would accuse him of is being a bit playboyish.
Yeah. So having Cary Grant basically be, let's just say, quote unquote, a murderer role kind of thing. He's there just being like an absolute arsehole. It's like, oh yeah, okay, but because it's Cary Grant, I suppose it's like said this sort of signal in the back of your head, sort of like hoping that like he's not a killer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So in a way, it's like his casting is playing with the audience. So it's like it's that thing that the lead character Joan Fontaine is sort of having in his head, where she's seeing everything we're seeing, but it's that sort of niggle in the back of your head thinking, yeah, but it's Cary Grant.
And not only that, this is so brazen. It's just like he can't be that bad. And I must admit, I did know the plot because and not all of the plot, but enough of it had entered public consciousness that I think I knew roughly what the ending is without the wrinkle we'll get to. I got what it says on paper about the ending, if you like. I knew that bit. But I would say if you'd have asked me on a sort of cold viewing, no knowledge of this film, if you'd stopped halfway through and said, is he a killer? I'd have gone, no, I don't think so. I don't think it will be. I think they're going to play this up as some kind of misunderstanding and he's just a prick. So I don't know. But yeah. Would you agree the second half was better though?
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think it's just a bit of a slow burn though, that's the thing. It kind of like it starts. It's quite well paced in terms of it starts off as this thing. It's like developing the relationships, and it just before you know it, you're like everything's just kind of ramped up naturally. To a degree, so because in your head you're already thinking, he's a dick, he's untrustworthy. He's not. He's not go. He's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing shifty things. By the time he got to the death of the friend. I
think that's the first time you actually think he might be because of the details.
Yeah.
Of that.
Well, no, but there's a little sort of thought she has of him killing him before that happens.
Yeah. But that just tells you it's the first time it's in her head. The first, of course, you're then looking for, if you trust the film to give you decent plotting, you're then looking for the evidence yourself.
Yeah.
And the evidence for yourself I mean, there's always bait and switch and stuff, of course, but the evidence comes in the details of that.
But the film does telegraph it as well, with him sort of playing around on the cliff front. Do you know what I mean? Where it cuts when they walk off, and it cuts to him, and it looks like they're fighting.
Yeah.
Or they're struggling. It's like.
But again, you end up. I get that. I don't mean we're smarter, but I get we're more sophisticated now because we've had nearly a century of cinema and storytelling on top of this. I get that, but I think they're smart. I'm trusting they're smart enough at the time to sort of be encouraging a bit of second guessing and a bit of, is this too obvious? Is this not? They'd probably have to be slightly more subtle now, but yeah. So pretty positive in general, Chris.
Yeah, generally see, as you say, not the best. With issues. As you say, the key one is because Cary Grant is just such a prick. It's played so brazenly that you just kind of like you don't buy the relationship working in itself. Do you know what I mean? I just can't find. I struggled with the why she's still there.
I thought it was going to be more like Rebecca. In Rebecca, he has his loving moments, but he has his cold and distant moments, and the facts of the storyline lead you to a maybe. But I think right up until the final act, you are still sort of on his side, hoping he wasn't. With this one, you tend to think you might come to the conclusion he probably didn't, but you're still left with, but he's still a twat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's difficult to get around, even if it's Cary Grant. But then you got to have someone who can play light and shade, and I think Tarantino is right on that. He could have played more evil parts because there's a lot of leading man I can't picture in this. In this sort of role. I mean, even though he could play a bit darker, I can't picture Jimmy Stewart doing this.
No, I mean, it was going to be George Sanders, apparently, wasn't it? Which was one of the thoughts I thought, yeah, I could easily see him do this.
Yeah,
but then that again, like I go back to what I said. Maybe it kind of works a bit better with Cary Grant because in the back of your head, it's still it's Cary Grant. Surely he's not. I can imagine that playing with the audiences at the time. Thinking. But anyway, Becca, what was your thoughts?
Becca, I was going to say, I want some thoughts from Becca.
Sorry, I was just perusing. It was an interesting point there. I was kind of thinking, was there a film where he played like an out-and-out villain? Cary Grant experts, if you're out there, let us know. I'm literally just kind of skimming.
And we're not talking roguish or shades of grey. We're talking, did he ever play, not necessarily a pantomime villain, or a real, really, really, really dark one, but could you ever confidently say, yeah, he was the bad guy in that film without doubt?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure. To be honest, I've obviously not seen all of his films. I've seen
nor have I. That's part of the problem.
Few. I mean, he sort of plays, characters that do have kind of like light and shade. I mean, one of my favourites of his is The Bishop's Wife, where he plays a literal angel who, comes down from heaven to try and convince David Niven's wife, that her husband doesn't need to build the church and just needs to kind of be more invested in the local community. But yeah, and other sort of famous roles, obviously, Baby Philadelphia Story.
David Niven could have played this role.
He could have done, yeah. He's kind of got that. I can see. I think George Sanders probably would have been a better fit because he'd already sort of had that reputation. I think that's why Foreign Correspondent was a bit different in a role for him. Because
David Niven's got the entitled wealthy toff about him as well. So
he has,
totally happy. Oh my God, the Emperor has no clothes. He didn't have any money. Yeah.
No, this is it. But I think with Cary Grant, I think also, as you say, we've had the luxury of having a century of cinema in between, and also we know more about some of his
Terry
characters.
Thomas. There you are.
Terry Thomas. There we go.
Make it a comedy. There you are. Done it.
Yeah, make it a comedy. Or
I always had him down.
Phillips, somebody like that.
I always had him for Dick Dastardly in the live action.
Oh really? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that would have been good fun because he really did have that sort of reputation. He was quite oily, and he could charm you out of all your millions. Yeah, somebody like that. I think.
Well, I don't have any millions left at all. So.
Well, no, me neither. After being charmed by
Terry Thomas.
By Terry Thomas, yes. Yeah, he had a quite interesting career, but yeah, we'll go down that rabbit hole. I recently saw Charade. I had never seen it before,
I've not seen it.
and it's
I think
fabulous.
that's on the iPlayer, I think.
I think it's on iPlayer. It's also available for free on YouTube, but I don't think it's a very good copy that's available.
Well,
I recently picked up the Criterion, which is excellent.
the iPlayer version of this wasn't brilliant, to be fair.
No, it's an older version, I think. It's not a restriction.
Particularly on the train at the start. It seemed either I tuned into it or it got a bit better.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, and there are some like cigarette burns in that as well. But I mean, it's not totally unwatchable. It's it's a decent, serviceable version. Is available on Blu-ray as well. But yeah, so first thoughts for me. Yeah, I do. I haven't even started to rank.
Charade was Donen, Stanley Donen, wasn't it?
Stanley Donen, that was it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I was just going through filmography, seeing as it's like kind of a role where he played like an out and out villain. I don't really think so. But again, as I say, I've only seen like a fair few of his films. Also, was at the beginning of this year or the end of last year, I think, there was that really great kind of biopic almost, starring Jason Isaacs, Archie. So it's really good, basically sort of covering his life.
I think it's 4-part.
Yeah, so it might still in the UK. It might
it's
still
on
be
the
on
ITVX. Yeah, free to
Definitely.
on ITVX.
I highly recommend it. It took me a bit of a hurdle because I think Jason Isaac, he's so, like, for me, he's quite an iconic actor, and I had to kind of get over that mental leap. But he's fantastic in whatever he does. He's such a fantastic actor.
I'm trying to find out.
And he does that voice really well, because I was thinking, oh my, really? He's got quite a distinctive look about him. Is he ever really going to be Cary Grant? And he was, totally. I was proved wrong, shall we say.
Box International. It's on BritBox in the USA.
Yes, that's still going in the US. So yeah, they've got the BritBox service, but over here in the UK, it was merged with ITV to become ITVX. So you can check that out for free.
I'm just aware. I would suggest almost half our listener base ain't in this country.
Yeah, we've got a US listener base. Definitely.
Most of them are in the States, so that's where you see it. And it's really good. It is as you would expect. This isn't even a complaint. It's just an obvious observation. It's very TV film.
Yeah, but it's very well done, though, I think.
It's very good.
And also, it's done with the blessing from Diane Cannon's family. It's had a lot of input as well, which is not to be sniffed at, I think. So yeah, a lot of input there, which I think is really important. Yeah, one of my highlights of the year. But yeah, going back to this film, I'd probably rank it slightly higher, just above Rebecca. I haven't even started ranking them yet.
No, I haven't really ranked them yet. I haven't really ranked them. My gut feeling is I saw less flaws in Rebecca, and the film felt more cohesive all the way through. Whereas, like with this one, I'm saying first half much weaker than the second half, and I've got this, and this problem with it. But other than that, I really liked it. Yeah,
you have to kind of like take, because it is Cary Grant, and you know that he's very smooth. He's such a charmer, and you sort of have to sort of take it, with a pinch of salt, and sort of think, is he a murderer? Is he? Don't know.
That's a big plus, though. I'd watch him in anything.
He was very, very watchable. He's clearly, Hitchcock is obviously very smart and clearly tapped into that kind of that star quality that Cary Grant has, definitely. And the same with Joan Fontaine as well. So they work together well, and Rebecca as well, and she's eminently watchable, really gorgeous. But you kind of feel like it's a bit of both, really. I mean, yes, his character is an ass. I mean, she is a little bit as well. But yeah, there's also an element, as I say, you're perfectly right, Dave. You could say, this is almost kind of like a spin-off of Gaslight, for example. The way that he does sort of continue sort of lie to her, spin these yarns, or come up with some line that she thinks is a fib, but is actually true. But he just hasn't told her for whatever reason, whether he's deliberately withholding that information, whether he is actually gaslighting her, or it's just I just forgot, sort of thing. And it's all about how he kind of does sort of erode that trust, really, whether he's trying to do that or not. I mean, there are some scenes where you do think, is he actually going to do it? But also you kind of think, oh, actually, like at the end scene, for example, is he trying to push her off the edge of a cliff, or was she really? It all became too much, so she decided to end it, and he was actually just saving her. It's all a bit kind of, not too sure. It could have gone either way. But I really enjoyed this one. I just find Cary Grant, he's just eminently watchable. Like, he's really magnetic. He has good chemistry, I think. I do find with both of his co-stars. I do, yeah, I would agree on the use of his pet name. I mean, I this is really stupid, but basically Monkey Face was a nickname I had for my pet dog because he was very naughty. He was a bit of a monkey boy, and he had a cute face, so I smashed two together. Had Monkey Face, but he would answer to it as well.
Wasn't he called? What was he called? Oh, it was Alfie, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's my little stuffed bull terrier that I had. His name was Alfie.
I got a momentary brain fart and thought that was Archie as well, which would have been a bizarre conversation, wouldn't it? Yeah, but that would have been bizarre, wouldn't it, if he'd been Archie and we've just been talking about that.
Well, it was called Alfie, but he wasn't named after Alfred Hitchcock. I was stressed. I hastened to stress. But just because, I think he was Rupert when he came to us, but we didn't really fancy that, and he didn't know that name.
That's a stupid name for that dog.
It's a silly name for that breed.
It would.
Maybe anything other than a stuffy. Maybe if the Cocker Spaniel that we have, maybe if he was male, it's probably more fitting for that breed. But yeah, he didn't really mash, so we called him Alfie instead. And he was a little monkey naughty boy. But yeah,
if you'd like to hear more about Becca's late dog, expect us to talk at gmail.com.
We're going right off on a tangent, but anyway, to going back to this film, I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it. It's probably one of my favourites. It is, Chris, you're right, it is a bit of a slow burn, but then here's the master of suspense. It does really take a while to get going, and you sort of have to really kind of buy in.
To be fair, Chris is a slow burn as he's getting older.
Yeah.
Aren't we all? But it's one of those things. It happens to the best of us, you know.
It's just because he's called Burn, but if you've got to explain the fucking joke, we're not all slow burns by definition,
he's a slow burn. This is it. Labour the point. But yeah, it takes a while to get going, and you kind of really have to buy into that relationship. I would agree that the use of the sort of pet name does become denigrating, and it's always, if it was me, I would just, when she comes to write that note, Johnny, I'm leaving you. That would be it. That would be the end of the film for me. I'd be like, so long, sucker. Can't do this anymore. Drive me around the bend. But yeah, there's obviously, like from a female point of view, you kind of have to sort of. There are some moments where you just think, would you really go back to him? Would you really kind of buy into this sort of relationship? But you just have to go with it. I think Joan Fontaine gives like such a compelling performance. And you sort of really have to feel for her at the end. What I kind of really do like most about this film is obviously the lighting and the kind of the whole way it's kind of put together. It's like with Cary Grant, it masterfully kind of throws kind of light and shade, and you don't really know his true intentions. Is he just a cad? Is he just a chronic liar buried in all these gambling debts? Or is he actually, is he up to it? And obviously there's that iconic scene where he's sort of bringing a glass of milk and it's all eerily glowing, shot against this kind of more expressionistic kind of lighting. Sort of harkens back to Hitchcock's days of like Ether, especially 1930s, and those kind of movie like Nosferatu.
There's hints of Nosferatu and all sorts in a couple of the shots.
Yeah, especially because we've got that remake coming out soon.
I don't want to overstate that. It's only one shot. I'm thinking.
It's the film's iconic scene. It's probably one of those ones it's most known for, and it's only like on screen for like 2 seconds, but it's probably the most iconic scene in the film. And yeah, it's just one of those things where like it kind of really turns like on a dime as well. There's a point where is it after they go to Paris or they come back from Paris, and then everything kind of seems to change. The whole sort of lighting becomes a lot moodier, and the sort of the house seems a lot more sort of threatening. Like everything's more kind of against her. But yeah, in a nutshell, yes, I enjoyed this film. Had a good time. Yeah, it is a bit of a slow burn. You do have to kind of really buy into that relationship between the two leads. But I mean, they're both really. Yeah, they got on really well together, even though perhaps they didn't off screen. Me personally, I wouldn't have realised that.
I didn't know that. I don't think I've read into that.
No, this is it. Well, I think they really don't kind of get on, and especially I don't think Cary Grant was a fan of the fact that Joan Fontaine finally got the Oscar that she was denied for the previous film.
Right. Well, I think it's amazing when you think of the time frames of this film. This comes out in late 41. I can't be bothered at looking at the exact filming schedules for these things, but it's a year after Rebecca. At most, even if one came out in the January and one came out in the December, it's less than 2 years. And Cary Grant, all right, he presents differently, but he is a similar age to Laurence Olivier at this point.
Yeah, he was really
and yet in Rebecca, I felt like she was so painfully, she might be in her behaviour, just like Chris said here, but when you put her next to Laurence Olivier, even though Olivier aged perfectly well at that point, she looked like too young for all of it. Do you know what I mean? And she doesn't in this, and it's a year later. It's really strange.
Yeah, I think it's how she's presented, isn't she? I think she's obviously dressed, she's styled a bit differently as well.
Could be that.
And I think makeup and costume have a lot to answer for as well, and also like how she was presented, like there's different effects that were used against her, used on her perhaps. I'm
paying her a compliment though, because it's not aging in the course of a year.
Oh, so no.
What I'm saying is, she obviously deliberately played with a different bearing in the two films, and I've noticed it.
Yeah. It's how she carries herself. You know, in the scenes where she's when she's not being too like put down or manipulated, she's quite sort of confident and like, you know.
I mean, she settles into being the wife of this reasonably well-known man much better than she did the second wife after Rebecca, obviously.
Yeah, she still didn't quite learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Whereas Rebecca, she's like walking on eggshells the entire film.
Yeah, whereas in this, you do see her out in the town talking, or the village, whatever it might be, talking to people.
The backlot.
And they say something about her husband, and she just doesn't. She's quite inscrutable. So, yeah, it is different. She's
like, oh, that's interesting.
Fucking bastard!
What have you done now?
Oh, fucking gonna slap Archie for that.
Yeah, seriously, if I was like. Yeah, if I was in her position, I'd be like, oh, really? Oh, what the fuck's he done now? Oh, my God. You know, I'd just be like, right, divorce. But it's probably not as easy in 1941 as it perhaps is now.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is in America. I don't think we've got the concept here, but obviously we've all seen loads of your films, and obviously with it being a fairly interconnected world now, I dare say we know people who've been through it. But, of course, they've got the concept of the annulment there.
Yeah.
We don't have that here.
No, that's it. Yeah, law kind of treats slightly differently. But no, I'm saying if that was me, I'd like divorce his ass so fast. I wouldn't hang around.
I'd divorce all of him.
Yeah.
I'm not just divorcing his ass.
But...
I'm still married to the rest of him, but his ass. That was enough.
His bum. His bum is enough. I don't want to comment on Cary Grant's butt.
His bum is enough. That's what they called his Bond film.
What about the rest of him? Dear. So yeah, in a nutshell, I enjoyed it. Yeah, so it's one of my favourites, I think.
Isn't there Pierce Brosnan line about that like first things first?
If such and such, they're going to have my ass.
Yeah, it's not my ass, and he's like, first things first.
It's butt in the trailer, and he just pauses, looks her up and down, and says, first things first.
Yeah, it's him and Christmas Jones when they just escaped the.
It's just
pipeline.
after the pipeline's blown up.
Yeah, she's like, you can have my ass, and he's like, first things first.
I love that. He's just nearly died, and his first thought is, do I go with anal now, or wait until we finish?
Roger Moore. I can hear Roger Moore saying that voice.
Well, to be fair, she brought it up. It's like.
That's very clever. Yes, he did.
He did.
Yeah. You're the one talking about your ass. I didn't bring it.
It's not sexual harassment if they mention another body part themselves. You can then threaten to. You can then pretend. You can then.
It was the 90s. It was 1999, so it was a different time. It was 25 years ago.
Thanks for you've done the maths. Thanks for that, Becca. I was sat there going, 99. When was that?
I can maths. Yay!
Thank you.
25 years ago.
25 years
In your
ago.
face dyscalculia. We can do it. We can do the math.
I seem to remember.
I just feel old now because I remember like.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. How to age yourself from one fell swoop.
Christ, 25 years ago.
Yeah, that was like my second Bond film at the cinema. Oh my God.
Yeah. All I remember is I remember what it opened to in the States, money wise. I'll be wrong to within a couple of million, but I've got a figure in my head.
You'll be in that ballpark.
Yeah, in my head it opened to like 38.1 or something, and then Toy Story 2 opened the next week and did really well for the time.
Yeah, it's one of the highest grossing like Bros era films, wasn't it? I think for the time.
Well, with the exception of Tomorrow Never Dies was slightly under Goldeneye, though it opened against Titanic. And and it still did well. It was still in the same ballpark. It was about 18 million less or something. And then the last two, The World Is Not Enough is a bit higher than both. And then Amazingly Die Another Day is significantly higher than the rest.
Yeah, it's an anniversary film.
But none of them. I can't speak for No Time to Die, and potentially not even Spectre. But at very least, the first 3 Craig films outgrossed all of his by.
Oh, sure, of course.
Including with inflation.
Yeah, but I just meant of the Brosnan cycle of films.
Anyway, Die Another Day was
Suspicion.
What about it?
Shall we talk about this film?
No, I wanted to talk about divorcing Denise Richards' bottom.
Talk about my dog. Talk about
and your dog. I don't want. When I say divorcing Denise Richards' bum and your dog, I don't mean divorcing your dog. Put a comma in there, all right?
Yeah, comma.
I've never been married to Becca's dead dog.
Oh my god! Right, let's get it away from the gutter now, please.
Okay, carry on.
But yeah, shall we
get away from the gutter?
Thoughts, haven't we?
Becca, do you know this show? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Have I been on this show before?
You've appeared on a few episodes of this, I'm sure of it. Shall we discuss this film sequentially?
Usually there's some gutterage mentioned, but anyway.
Have you heard this podcast?
My guttering needs some cleaning.
Well, I think
with the winter, some leaves have got in it. Yeah,
ravaging us this weekend. Yeah,
your guttering needs a clean, right? I was expecting to talk to you.
I mean, we won't do anything about it.
We do anything about it, but we can sympathise. Right.
I don't know. I'll maybe get the council out. I don't know about that one.
Right. I am getting on to sequential now because we're nearly.
Well, at least I won't go on to like a 2-hour rant about Thunderbirds this time.
Yeah, but I loved that. It was brilliant. It's a pity Foghorn Leghorn's lost to poor recording equipment.
That was great, Foghorn Leghorn.
The thing is, you can't. I don't know how you recreate that. You know what I mean? Because if we do ever redo the Moonraker commentary, which I'm quite happy to do, because we lost 40 minutes of Chris, right? So you got me responding.
Done it, though.
Yeah, but we lost 40 minutes of your
really
audio.
Recreate that moment, can we? Because I think that's lost forever.
Yeah, but we did do the Moonraker commentary again, though. I'm sure we did.
We redid A View to a Kill.
I'm sure we did Moonraker again.
I think we've only redone A View to a Kill because people complained we didn't talk about the film. Imagine that. I hadn't divorced any dogs at that point. But no, I
Stuffy, leave him alone.
It's not a real thing, Becca.
No, I know, I'm joking.
I get the police involved and see what I was up to in 2014.
He was my little soul dog, all right.
Right. So anyway, yeah, we redid A View to a Kill because that was the episode we had Mark O'Connell. And we ended up sort of interviewing him. We talked about the film a little bit, but literally one comment, and it wasn't even nasty, said, "It would have been nice if you talked about the film."
Yeah, so have you not listened to us?
But the problem is now, right, the best bit of that Moonraker interview, apart from the skydive at the start, where I'm talking about him sticking his face in the other guy's arse as though it's strategic, right, is Chris went on about Foghorn Leghorn. Right, but it doesn't matter what that was. We've referred to it before. But if we're watching it again, and not Helen Slater is in the sort of class place in Venice, and he suddenly starts talking about Foghorn Leghorn, it will sound too contrived. It came up quite, anyway.
It was very organic, wasn't it?
I can't even remember how it even came up.
But... I've no idea how that came up. But he cast a CGI live action film version of Foghorn Leghorn. We got, but we lost the audio, so we can't prove it was him and sue for damages when it happens.
No.
Although I doubt it'll happen, to be fair, given who he chose. Right. Shall we discuss this?
Stranger things have happened.
They will. Yeah. Mel Gibson still has a career, so it's possible.
Oh God. Right. Anyway, yes. Let's discuss the film sequentially.
All right. So the first half of the film, I think we can talk through almost in not necessarily seconds, but just a few minutes, because there's a good flow to it, but there's no real suspicion. It's just he meets her on a train, those old-fashioned trains with the compartments where you're sort of facing each other, and they come to take the ticket. She's got a first-class ticket because she's from, if not nobility, then certainly wealth. he's got a third class ticket, but claims it was first class, and then starts like scratching around to do a deal with him to stay there. And that's about it, apart from her reading the London Picture News because she's like illiterate.
Maybe that sets her up as being quite innocent, bit of a, you know.
I just like the idea.
Not very worldly.
How far could you go with that? Could you get London pop-up news? where you open the book and like Maggie Thatcher springs out because she's just died or something. I quite like that as an idea, actually. Pop-up news. Like you get to the sports pages at the back and like a boxing glove flies out because someone's had a fight.
A big football comes out.
Yeah. I don't see why not. Sex scandals would be very entertaining in that sort of book. Except, well, not John Prescott, to be fair. But anyway, so she's reading London Picture News, and there's a photo of him at some event. So he goes to like society events, things like the races and so on. And then what is that second event? Because it cuts from that to like another event he's at, and everyone's speaking to him like it's a posh thing. I don't know if it's a hunt. I don't know if it's a lunch.
It's a hunt, isn't it? Yeah, it's a kind
I thought it was kind of like a horse racing type thing.
Yeah, another kind of posh do. Everyone knows him. Basically, he's kind of like this man about town, isn't he? He's kind of very popular with the ladies.
Well, I get the impression that his dad's a name as well, so he's a bit of a waster, but he's not. He comes from, to use an old-fashioned phrase, he comes from good stock. But he's like, I hate that.
Like he's
phrase.
a horse.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? He comes from like somebody well known who's done quite well, but he's inherited nothing. And because he's got that name, he can walk around and do what he wants, and people assume he does have money. So he gets talking to her. And then this is where she overhears her parents talking about her and saying she'll never marry. That might explain why she was dressed so spinsterish in the first scene. It's almost that you know Pottersville when you see Mary if she'd never met George.
Yeah, she does look a bit like that.
It's that sort of look. I'm not saying it's the same clothing, but it's the same vibe. Yeah. So she looks like someone who will never marry, and again, that's just the standards of the time rather than stereotyping or anything.
I suppose it's a bit harsh, though. Sorry,
it was.
I think that's a bit harsh.
I don't think what I said.
No, not you.
Oh,
no.
you mean what the parents said?
Yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
what I think is harsh.
Yeah, but I don't think they're rude about it because they actually mean it quite respectfully, and they're sure. Like not. I can't remember the exact words, but the tone of it is all like, you know, everybody's different, you know, and it may not be for her.
Even like later on, in the film, she's described as very carefully brought up.
Yeah, but it never came off as she'll never get a man that way or whatever.
But I think it's a bit harsh. Anyway, carry on.
If you did want to, theoretically in your life, either marry or meet and fall in love with somebody, hearing that through a window from your parents would be upsetting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But it'd be worse if you were listening through the window and they go, you know, she's an ugly bastard anyway.
She's a hoe.
Yeah, or like no one's going to want her with tits like that. No.
There was like one sort of thing. So just before that, so he kind of persuades her away to go to church for going to walk with him instead. And I thought, well, that's that kind of bit of a symbolic thing. It's like he's like drawing away.
He's drawing away from the righteous path.
Yes,
the path of the righteous man. He should have been played by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, yeah. You're
no
right.
doubt he looked exactly the same as he did then. Like.
Yeah. None of these people ever age. Except Bond girls are the only people that age. Bonds and Bond girls are the only people that age.
Bond ladies, they go on forever. Bond girls are forever.
They are actually. It's really funny. Just the final aside, some of those have aged really, really well. I saw Mariam Darbo fairly recently, and she still looks amazing.
Yeah, she looks glamorous.
She looks great for like well into her 60s. So he then sort of cancels meeting him again, and he disappears, and he leaves her a note, or he sends her a note or a telegram or something like that to say, "Come to the hunt ball." And what I love about this is he doesn't have an invite or a ticket at all. He just turns up and like just talks his way in. And this is kind of where they sort of start to fall in love. And then it's kind of montage heavy, isn't it? They kind of marry fairly quickly, and then they travel
walk out of platoon laughing.
They walk out of platoon laughing. They clothesline another couple on the beach. No, they I mean, they go on honeymoon, and you just get quick, like they travel by stock footage. You get a shot of like what's that building that burnt down in Paris? The one that had the fire.
Oh, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, that's it. I couldn't think of the word. I always go to say Arc de, and I was like, no, it's not Arc de Triomphe. What am I trying to say? Notre Dame, that's it. So you get a shot of that for when they're in Paris. You get a shot of Venice and so on. They're on a bit of a European tour. And then they come home to ostensibly whatever his house is. And he's got a maid there, perfectly nice sort of lady who sort of helps him as like a housekeeper stroke maid. And he kind of outright says he doesn't have any money, doesn't he? We do meet what's his friend called? What's his friend called? The one who dies. Yeah. Now we do meet Beaky at this point because Beaky says to him, "What do you want me to do with the bill?" And you see a momentary look of. I thought I was seeing panic on his face. He's like, "Just put it there." So it's immediately like this guy can't pay his bills, and he's basically saying, I'll just borrow money or I'll win money, or he doesn't have a job. Yeah. And she
even kind of the idea of work. He's like, really? What? Put on old clothes and grab a shovel, you know.
And this is slightly pushing it as a scene in that if this was real time in the real world, you wouldn't get all this done in the 3 or 4 minutes of running time we've got here, because we go from he doesn't have a job to him talking to like her father, and then ideas are in the and then it's like, but he gets a job with it's an estate agent of some kind, but Captain Melbeck, who's like a friend of the family and a friend of his family, he's going to go get a job there, and then no more gambling, that's all the rest of it. What's the next thing? Is the next thing the antique chairs?
Yeah, so he gets a pair of these chairs. Obviously, I think Lena's father gives them to them as a wedding present. Yeah. Which he promptly sells them off, a great profit.
We're not running through this deliberately fast, but there's nothing here that you feel the need to like linger on, because they are just. I wouldn't call them data dumps. I'm not saying they're just exposition, but I'm just saying the film just rattles along, goes from scene to scene, and just gives you this information. So she's got these seats she really likes. They're antique, if you like, and they disappear from the house one day. Around the same time, I'll get the order of events slightly wrong because it's cutting around fast for this era, not fast in general, but fast for this era. At some point she finds he's been seen at the racetrack again, and then she sees the chairs in the window, but not yet. Oh no, she does see them in the window. Sorry, she does. And she comes back and she asks, Beaky says, mention chairs when he's here and you'll see how quickly this guy can just make up lies. But he says it almost as like, oh, he's a bit of a character, isn't he? He doesn't say,
it's hilarious. Oh, can I...
watch this. Watch how clever he is making this shit
passed off as like his charm, and that's just his way, and it's like
Yeah. He claims to have sold it to some Americans, but then of course a scene or so on, even though she's seen it in the doors, he comes in, and this is the difference. This is where he's veering between honesty and what are you going to do about it, and gaslighting, because the next thing he turns up with a ton of presents, which it almost looks like the post-affair apology. You know what I mean? Go home with a load of presents, but it not literally an affair in this case, but that's kind of guilt offering. What it actually is he's come into £2,000, which he then claims is based on the 200 that he sold the chairs for. And he said, it wasn't the Americans. Of course it wasn't. And he says that to her face. And when she looks miserable, this is the scene where I just think, this made me itch. I was like, please walk out. He's making Beaky's making duck noises. and he's like playing with her chin, and they're clearly trying to make her laugh, and it's like no one's really going to laugh.
As if they're kind of like talking to a child, isn't it, rather than an actual, an adult woman.
Yeah, it's like trying to cheer someone, cheer a toddler
a baby
after a tantrum. Yeah, absolutely. Or you've told a child off for a tantrum, and now you're trying to like get things back to normal.
Trying to lighten the mood.
Yeah. I really hated that sequence.
It's just it's just cringy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it just makes it serve to think that it basically kind of serves the purpose that he sort of thinks he's kind of she is basically a child, perhaps maybe.
But also he's bulletproof.
Yeah.
If he
exactly.
If he bullshits long enough and tries to make her laugh and tries to be charming.
Yeah, he's all right. He gets off scot-free.
And he's helped by Beaky, because Beaky is. When I say simple-minded, I don't mean simple. I literally mean he's just really good-natured, bit naive, doesn't think too deeply about anything, and he's there and he's nice. He's like good-hearted, and so he helps. Having you do judge people by their friends to some degree, and he's there and he's likable, so that probably does help. And then the next thing is she goes into. Is this where she goes into the village? And she's had all these presents, and her husband's now got a job, and he said to her, after the bit of honesty, he said, this is from the last bet I'll ever place, that I'll never gamble again. And she goes into town, and she's like, I think I saw him at the racetrack. And it's like, we can't have done. He was at work.
Yeah, she's like, I'll get to the bottom of this. That's interesting, thank you.
So she goes into that building, and you can see the secretary's terrified, doesn't want to say anything. I say secretary, she could be an estate agent, but one of the staff there is too scared to say anything. She's like, go and talk to Mr.
So speak to Mr. Aysgar. Speak to Mr. Melbeck, Captain Melbeck.
And it turns out they'd done an audit, and £2,000 was missing, which is exactly what he just spent on all the presents. So it's not just gambling debts, he's just stolen money.
He's just a thief.
And
it's quite funny because he played the jewel thief, John Ruby.
Well, this is where I get a little bit. I need to see that film. I'm seeing it again. And this is where I get a bit lost on the sort of order of events. I know the order of the plot. I don't know the order of the scenes. So at this point, she knows he's embezzled money. But there comes what comes next. Is this where she writes to? Because at some point she sees a letter. I think this is later. She does see a letter at one point to him, and he's saying that he's trying to get the money. And then after that, along this one path, he gets letters from her estate, her life insurance, saying they can't release. He wanted to borrow against the insurance, and she said, well, you can't. The only way you're getting this money is if your wife dies.
Yeah.
But I think before that, she'd already written a letter to say she's leaving him because she's heard about the embezzlement. So she
decides it's all too much and writes a note. Johnny, I'm leaving you.
And then she tears it up, and he walks in and says, so you've heard. And we think he's talking about what's happened with the embezzlement.
And then he produces a note saying, unfortunately, your father has passed away.
Saying his father's passed away from heart.
I think that's quite done quite well, though. It's a sort of twisty way, because we're kind of with her at this point, and we think, oh my God, what has he done now? And
we don't really have telegrams
anymore, you've heard, and you're thinking, So it's kind of, so we're kind of almost being hoodwinked in that way.
Well, when Mr. Gower in It's a Wonderful Life was told his son had died of influenza.
Yeah.
We don't see them very often, and I've never had a telegram in my life. I don't know if they've existed in my lifetime, so it always stands out to me when you see one on film.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? Yeah, it's very much from a time gone by.
So the next plot point would be the reading of the will.
For the modern generation, it'd be like, oh, there's a letter arrived, rather than like an email.
I guess, yeah. You got mail.
You got mail.
That film didn't date at all, did it?
No.
You've got some bird sliding into your DMs.
Yeah. What would it be today? Sliding into your DMs? I don't know. Yeah, sending a voice note.
Yeah, but that implies someone's got a Doc Martens fetish, doesn't it? Sliding into your DMs.
Sliding into your PMs.
So the next plot point would be the reading of the will. She's got no extra money, basically. She's just been told, my late wife, obviously her mother, we'll get everything. Please keep my daughter Lena's $500 a year. Or is it pounds? I can't remember what country.
Probably £500 a year. It's one of those films. It's you can kind of say like shooting over the south coast of England. It's nothing like Southern California.
Yeah, I think actually looking at it, it looks like British coast. But yeah, but we know it was shot in America. So with a guy that was born here but was ostensibly American. So I don't know. But anyway,
it's interesting, isn't it? Like, is it British? Is it American? It's an international picture.
So there's one plot point I need to just quickly call back to that we missed, and it will be relevant to the next scene. When he was coming home with the post-affairs, post-gambling presents, Beaky wanted a brandy, and he sort of tried to talk him out of it very lightly and said, oh, maybe just one. And then he literally looked like he was dying. He started coughing, he sat down, he went kind of, not stiff as in rigor mortis, but he went rigid. And then sort of, they just said one day this will kill him, but he'll
nothing we can do about it.
Nothing we do. And he comes back to life.
So it lays that kind of seed, doesn't it?
It lays the seed that he might be allergic to brandy. He might be, and that's the sort of one of the suspicious elements, I guess. That is it that, or is it what we're going to come to in a minute? So the next point is they're driving somewhere, and he sees some land that he thinks he can do something with. And he gets a very sort of naive Beaky into this scheme for like some land development. And she tries to talk Beaky out of it because she's already starting to feel worried. But it's the scene Chris referred to, or no, you referred to actually, where she looks at a picture of the land and imagines him being pushing Beaky off the cliff.
Yeah. That's sort of the dream sequence.
Yeah. It isn't. But if anyone listening from this country has ever been to the north coast of Cornwall, where it's all very sort of steep cliff edges down to the water, it looks a bit like that, although it clearly isn't. But it is like treacherous rocks and steep falls.
Yeah, it's almost a little bit like there's that I want to say Jamaica Inn, but it might not be that Jamaica Inn. But again, it's kind of like it's that sort of rocky cliff edge, sort of looking down.
No, Jamaica Inn had very similar, although I think it literally was Cornwall, but this looks very like it. Yeah,
and then again, we'll kind of see that motif again in Vertigo, I think. But yeah, something she's literally kind of driven to the edge at that point, of maybe just her sanity and also maybe her patience. In terms of kind of, she's imagining what he can do and what he's capable of, or what maybe she imagines that he's capable of, whether he is or not. Because it's all very much like, it's all like from her point of view, really, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, and she, the thing is, we don't see anything we don't see.
This is it. It could just be her fantasy that she wants to be.
Look at Beaky's death, right? Which we're going to come to in just a moment. So sorry, spoiling that 15 seconds.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. But look at Beaky's death.
For a very old film, spoiler alert.
All we know about it is what she knows about it. That's all. So, for example, Beaky, I've forgotten why, but I think they're going to call the whole land thing off because he's scared Johnny off. He's desperate to make money fast, frankly. Beaky goes to Paris, and I can't remember why.
Some business.
I don't know if
business
it's
that he's finishing up.
Something to do with business.
It's all quite vague, isn't it? I think it's vague for a purpose.
Yeah. Now, Johnny is supposedly in London at this point, and the police turn up to her place and says, well, I can't imagine the police doing this in reality. If the police came to your door and said, well, something terrible's happened, and you go, well, what is it? And they hand you a copy of today's Sun newspaper. It's like, surely they would just tell you, not hand you the newspaper, but whatever. The newspaper.
Yeah, that bit I do find a bit far-fetched.
That's weird. That's just weird. But she read that Beaky dies over there, and I can't remember if they know what it is at this point. But they start talking to her about the details they know. And basically, someone has gone into the bar. Two English gentlemen have supposedly gone into the bar. No description of the other man, but he's with another man who calls him Old Bean, which we've heard.
All Bean.
But yeah,
they say words
that sound like
signify
it.
That
And he's used that. That's the first time you go, yeah, it probably was his. Not only that, he knows about the brandy the brandy allergy.
Yeah, allergy. Yeah, it's allergy reaction.
Police say that they said he's gone in there, he's dared this man to have a massive glass of brandy and left before he drunk it, and it's killed him. So that just looks like murder in every single way. And then letters start arriving for him, which he reads while he's in the bathroom, and it's him trying to borrow against her life insurance. And they've written to her and said, well, she'd have to be dead for that to be the case. You can't borrow against it. Before I shut up and let others talk, the last thing I've forgotten to say, I haven't missed a major plot point, but there's this tiny little sort of subplot thing that there's a woman in the village called Isabel who writes mystery novels about murders and things like that. And Cary Grant's character, Johnny, is like a huge fan of these books, and he's always borrowing them. And of course, they describe different ways to murder people. And one of the latest ones he's borrowed is about a brandy-related poisoning.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say, did you guys pick up on that one? I think that's really clever. It's a bit kind of understated.
Well, it's a bit on the nose, though, isn't it?
Just a little bit. Yeah, I was going to say it. Hardly understated at all.
It can't be understated and on the nose.
No.
I
was trying to be sarcastic.
I mean, like, it's just a bit like...
Either you're wrong. What I'll quickly say is...
No, I was trying to be a bit sarcastic, actually, because I think it's quite on the nose.
Well, no, I thought you were trying to say if you didn't notice it, if you weren't paying that much attention and missed it. But no, you're right. I think I'm with Chris. It's right on the nose.
It is a bit obvious.
It's a bit like, oh, come on now, because it's like, you've already established well enough about the brandy thing.
Yeah.
In person, you don't. Yeah. It's a bit hard to sort of go, oh, by the way, there's this book that gave him the idea to do it. It's like, I know he would have got the idea before, and it just seems a bit too. What's the word? It's just.
Do you think it's belabouring the point too much?
It's also not believable. It's like,
through an unbelievable plot point. And I think the next plot point's even worse. They go to dinner at this author's house, along with a doctor who's used to... Well, I say a doctor. He is a doctor, but he's best known at this point in his life for autopsies. So he's looked at the bodies of murder victims and stuff like that. And Cary Grant starts talking quite openly about untraceable poisons. And what he's trying to find out.
So if you were to murder someone, how would you get away with it then?
The film's attempt at subtlety, and again, at this point, I have to say, 80-year-old film, they're going to have some subtleties missing that you might come up with now. But he starts by saying something like arsenic, but he presents it like that's his genuine knowledge of the situation. You'd use arsenic. And the doctor's there saying, well, no, because we checked this body that was years after, and you could still tell traces of arsenic. And then he goes, come on, there must be an untraceable one. And you can just see Lena sat there just going, oh my God. But it's a bit obvious.
Yeah, it is a bit kind of on the nose. But also, yeah, he's discussing arsenic. And then, a few years later, he'd star in Arsenic and Old Lace, where he's left you to a pair of aunties who are going around murdering people.
Now, do you think it's so on the nose brazen at this point because the film is heading in and doing the whole, he's not really a killer actually. They're just overselling it at this point.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if they had the subtlety in this era. And again, it's not an intelligence point. It's about the film industry is very young still. So things that we've gone, well, that's a bit obvious, Yeah. Even in our lifetimes, there have been things that were in films that were incredibly fresh and innovative at one point that are now really cliche. So
yeah, it's just a different attitudes at the time.
Yeah, but yeah, so she's freaked out by this, goes home, faints, sleeps for about a day, and when she wakes up, the author's there, and she's saying, again, it's this point that Chris is making, playing on the charm of the actor. Yeah. She's like, you can't deny Johnny anything. And she admits that she finally, because her and the doctor were both going, no, that untraceable thing in the book, I made that up. You can't do that. There's no such thing. But of course, she does research her novels. She does use this doctor's knowledge, and she's admitted to Johnny there is an untraceable poison, and this is what it is.
Yeah.
She wakes up knowing this, And then he brings her in a glass.
Then he brings her a glass of milk, which may or may not be poison. But also, I think that's kind of also like, obviously Hitchcock was very much into the macabre and anything to do with like murder, anything like that. It was kind of like anything to kind of shock your audience or to gross them out a little bit or make them kind of feel uncomfortable and kind of squirm in their seats. I mean, he was really out for a little bit of that. I was listening to an episode of Foreign Correspondence, and I think it was probably about Sabotage, actually.
Available on all good podcast providers.
Yes, I would also agree.
That's my subtle advert for them. That just was weaved into the show seamlessly.
Seamlessly? Oh, how would you know?
No, it's just something. It's just something I felt like saying. Available
on all good podcast platforms.
What's it called? What, Foreign Correspondence?
Hosted by two very good Polish students of Hitchcock. Highly recommended. But yeah, no, they kind of mentioned. I think.
Are you sure you're not reading that? They're not just polished, are they?
They are very polished, but they were debating the whole like bomb on the bus kind of scene, and how shocking and controversial it was kind of at the time. I think one liked it, one didn't. It was a very kind of heated debate, I would say. But they were saying how also like Hitchcock was he was very much he sometimes had this. I mean, he was known for his kind of like impish kind of sense of humour, really. Anything he could do to shock you or gross you out. Anytime he could push the envelope, definitely. And that was kind of one of those times because it was quite controversial at the time and still remains to be, I guess. And yeah, I think the idea was that sometimes, he does kind of have this air of like being this kind of like sort of like naughty uncle, or kind of like a he tries to sort of pervert the course of justice, well, not really, but tries to sort of corrupt you somehow, or certainly threatens or tempts you into doing that. But again, I think that's kind of more like anything to do with like a little bit of like, anything that's a bit unsavoury. He'll kind of tease you with, or he'll kind of throw that in because that's what kind of appeals to him. And that he did have this kind of really naughty sense of humour, and he's got a sense of the macabre, things like that. I think that's just Hitchcock kind of showing us that side of him. Really.
There's always an understated humour, and I stress understated because
it's all done kind of like
you could watch these films and never spot humour at all if your sensibility wasn't attuned to picking it up.
No, that's it. I mean, like Psycho, for example, is probably like one of the pitch black comedies ever. Really, but you can read it any which way. You can read it as like a noir, a black comedy, as a thriller, straight up. It's one of those things, and the same here as well. There's a lot of black humour in this film, in Suspicion, but you just have to know where to look for it.
So, can we just talk about, because we're at the end of the film now. She's had enough of this. She's scared to drink that. She's already talked about going to her mother's, and so she packs up a bit. It's meant to be a visit. She kind of sells it that my mother needs me or she's nervous or whatever. And so he decides he's going to drive her to her mother's. And he drives at 50 to 60 miles per hour, which is fast in that era with those cars on those roads. It's coastal roads. He suddenly decides on a shortcut. She's terrified he's going to murder her. At one point, her door flies open. It's a convertible car. It's open top anyway. And he reaches across to her, and she pulls away. He looks. It's shot ambiguous whether he's trying to save her.
Yeah.
And then they pull over, and he says, effectively, "Well, no, I was just going to commit suicide. I wasn't in London. I wasn't in Paris. I was in Liverpool. I went to your insurer." He knows she's seen that. He knows she's.
Do we believe him?
So he's gone to our insurer and said, "Can I have a loan?" He said, "We couldn't do that. I was going to kill myself. That's what that was about. But I will face the consequences now, even if that involves prison." And she melts immediately and says, "Oh my goodness, let's face this together." And they go to drive home, and Tarantino pointed this out. I may not have noticed it myself. You follow the back of the car, and he puts his arm around her, which is very much, you're still in my thrall. You're still under my spell.
Yeah.
Now, that could be he'll take her home and kill her, or it could just be
carry on.
Many more cases of bullshit and trying to find money some other way.
Yeah.
Ostensibly, the film can get away with saying, well, he was innocent, because if you literally read the script, he is. But there's enough ambiguity that Hitchcock got his way, and I actually think that's worked out better than doing a film where it's flat out, yeah, he was.
Because I think let's just say you were going to make this like today, this kind of thing, you would go for the ambiguous ending where like you don't actually know.
Yeah, didn't he? You wouldn't want to kind of, you'd go for that open ending.
Whereas what they've tried to do here is ostensibly go for the clear ending that no, he's innocent, but Hitchcock is smart enough to make it ambiguous.
Yeah.
I mean, would you cast somebody, who's known for playing sort of handsome romantic roles, and would you have it so that, oh yes, he's now an out murderer, or would you do it actually? No, he was trying to save. He was actually trying to end it all, and he just tried to save it all, and he's actually trying to make good at long last. Or would you do it the ambiguous way?
I think do ambiguous, but I think the only other way would be to kind of like go everything, all the evidence that's pointing to the fact that he is wrong. It's like, oh, we misunderstood that, but twist, oh, he actually is trying to kill her. There's other thing that we completely missed.
Yeah.
That'll be the only other way, because it would be like a kind of like a, oh, okay, everyone gets, the audience don't feel let down, but then they don't feel like it's not as cut and dry as it been told. You know what I mean? They're expecting a twist, but
if I were to make a case against this film, and I'm not really going to, well, we have actually said things, all three of us, in the opening sort of bits of this where we've said, yeah, and that's not quite right, and this isn't quite right, but we've come out on the positive side. Were I to come out on the negative side and say flat out that doesn't work, it's almost like you could make an argument Hitchcock's just stuck two fingers up at the material, in that he's basically had the studio say to him, no, he has to be innocent. And he'll go, right, fine, I'll make a film where he's such an unreserved fucking twat. It's going to be obvious he's guilty. And then at the end, I'll put some mealy-mouthed words in where we go, no, he's innocent, honest.
Yeah,
and
he's sort of...
And then as he drives away, he'll put his arm around her, and I've just basically spent an hour and a half going, fuck you, studio. That would be the case.
Yeah, he's had to kind of obviously bend over backwards and say, look, we can't portray Cary Grant as a villain.
I don't think that's
basically.
quite true. I think there's a bit of a loss of subtlety over time.
No, this is it. And then kind of at the end, he said, okay, well, I'll bend to your will, but I'll do this just to, just to stick two fingers up.
I will just launch my final thoughts with that. My final thoughts are, I can make that case against this film, that it's almost a director that's smart, at least thinks he's smarter than the studio he's working for and the audience he's working for, and thinks, well, I can just do this and fucking bollocks. So what? I can still make a decent film that's entertaining. In reality, I just think 80-year-old film, bits that would be subtle at the time are screamingly obvious now. Chris is absolutely right that the flaws of making him so bad, I actually think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's too obvious. I think there's things wrong with doing it that way, but at the same time, it doesn't have to leave you questioning yourself, because you go, would a filmmaker really make him this much of a fucking dick if he was? I enjoyed it thoroughly. 40-50% of that is it's Cary Grant. I love Cary Grant. I think he's really great in most things he does. He's magnetic. Admittedly, the film is Academy ratio, but you still have a bigger screen, and screen presence does come through. I'd love to see.
You could overlook that a little bit, but yeah, for the star power.
He's got that, and so I really enjoyed it. It's a lot more flawed than, say, Rebecca. But it's in the top few. Really like it. We're starting to see a bit of star power now as we get on a bit further. Joan Fontaine is even better than this. Well, I think she is flat out better than this than she was in Rebecca, even though Rebecca is arguably in some ways a harder role. Very positive. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, I have issues with it, but I think it's an interesting case. It's. I think when you consider the history and the studio politics of it, it does raise some questions. You do go, what was Hitch really kind of being like? Was he trying to like sort of pull walls over?
Is this his best attempt at subtlety, or does he know that like there's no pretending shit? Is there?
He sort of had to. He trod that fine line, really, didn't he? It's kind of you got to kind of please the senses at the same time, but also he wants to be kind of true to the source material. But then also it's Hitchcock. He's got to put his own twist on these things. He's balancing act. He's kind of spinning many plates here, I think.
Well,
I think he's smart enough to massively signpost and go, I know I'm massively signposting here.
I mean, again, it's like to kind of what Tarantino said in that clip. But I before I even watched that clip, I did watch it thinking, if he made this like at the same era, say Psycho, like how much would this be off the chart? Like how would this be like? Or like how different was the film if this was Hitchcock unleashed? Like it was just like
if he just made it 20 years later.
I need to stress that again. I know I said it earlier, but I need to stress it again. It was a 4-minute clip, but I've heard him talk about Hitchcock before, and certainly Tarantino detractors, of which I am certainly not one, just assume they think he wants a more liberal filmmaking environment where there's more blood, more this, more that. I say more this and that because he's never really done a lot of nudity and stuff like that. But certainly,
to be fair, he did make Frenzy at the end of his career, didn't he?
He's a big fan of De Palma though as well. So
yeah, he really was. And then Hitchcock did make sort of Frenzy towards the end of his career as his penultimate film, and I think that was really him pushing the envelope as far as he could go in terms of 1970s.
Now, what I'm trying to say is, right, if you take a film like Psycho, you're assuming, or not you, I'm saying the general you out there, could be taken for assuming that Tarantino's saying, well, when he stabs Marion in the shower, we don't really see anything. He's not saying that. He's literally saying that because of the codes of the time, typically third acts tend to be compromised because you have to tie you have to tie everything up in a certain moral way. That's all he's saying. He's not
sort of check certain boxes.
He's not saying, I wish Hitchcock made films more like mine are. That's not what he's saying.
No. I mean, it's both totally different sensibilities, operating in different timescales, different eras.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Tarantino, he's famously not anti-Hitchcock, but yeah, he's famously not a fan of those third acts, and they do very much kind of like fall away as well. But he acknowledges that how influential he's been, on his films.
Oh, he was really complimentary about him.
Yeah,
he said,
definitely.
I don't vibe with him, but he was a genius.
Yeah, it's just kind of the sort of third acts that he's famously not a fan of, which is fair enough. I think we're all allowed.
Yeah, Becca, do you want to give us some final thoughts, and then we'll fact everybody and fuck off, frankly.
Fact off.
Fact off, yeah, that condensed it, saved time.
I had a good time with it. I mean, yes, it's not perfect by any sort of means, but yeah, it's kind of one of my favourites. Really, you do sort of have to make those sort of mental leaps. One of the first many collaborations, Hitchcock and Cary Grant. They had a bit of a rough time making this. He wasn't too happy about Joan Fontaine and all the accolades, but at the same time, they would make up their differences and then go on to make those few famous films that they made together. Despite playing this kind of like slippery type role, obviously didn't have a major dent on Cary Grant's career. He would carry on to be wonderful and a legendary smoothie throughout his career, and play like a whole range of different roles. His own performance is quite good, despite the kind of off-screen tension that they had. Certainly, I that's just my opinion. I certainly wouldn't know that. I think they have sort of great chemistry together, and you constantly sort of think, is he, isn't he? Certainly from her point of view. I mean, yes, he is an ass, and she is perhaps sometimes a bit naive. It's kind of fitting, as I said, in that kind of don't trust your husband sort of cycle, by Emmanuel Levy, which is really interesting. I'll try and post a link to that as well, as that's that kind of like cycle of films. And I'll probably mention it as we go along as well. But yeah, it also has such a great cast. You've got Dame Whitty, who we've seen from Lady Vanishes, Cedric Hardwicke, who also pops up in Rope, which we will cover on the series. Nigel Bruce, who is probably one of the iconic Dr. Watsons from Basil Rathbone era Sherlock Holmes.
There's been a lot of Hitchcock, a lot of Sherlock in Hitchcock, hasn't there?
A lot of Sherlock Holmes is a combination of the two. But just kind of popular character actors of their day.
That's it. That's it. It's the era. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the era of what it's in. I mean, there's probably some. Well, yeah, the only reasons that George Sanders didn't appear and that Laurence Olivier didn't appear was that Cary Grant was cast instead. Yeah. But yeah, it's that kind of sort of just who popular faces of the day. And also Isabel Jeans as well, who appeared in Downhill, which we covered, and Easy Virtue, which we didn't. So again, it's Hitchcock kind of really opening his little black book and sort of drawing on names that he's worked with. Like we see that in Frenzy, where he'd cast an actress that he'd worked with in the 1920s, had a really long career. Chemistry between the leads are really great. It kind of keeps you guessing all the way through. I mean, yeah, it's not really complex. There are some parts of it that perhaps wouldn't fly today, and you really would think, really. So you'd have to kind of be a lot more kind of with it. But I like how Hitchcock does kind of subvert. I mean, yes, he's kind of torn between the senses and the original material, and having to kind of pull the rug out from underneath the studio and the producers. But I kind of like how he's still, he's got that subversive twinkle in his eye. He kind of really, wants to kind of corrupt you in some way, and provide a few, thrills and twists and turns along the way. And obviously he's not setting out to do a character assassination on Cary Grant, but he's just kind of looking to maybe like subvert that traditional image, certainly as we know him, which is something that he would do with his leading ladies and do with his actors, most famously Tony Perkins and obviously Jimmy Stewart. I just think it's something clever that he does. But yeah, definitely is. Yeah, it's one of my favourites. I enjoyed this one. It's not perfect, but I had a good time, and it's just a classic, really, isn't it? Beautiful shots of which may or not scenery, which may or may not be Southern California. Really enjoyed this one. So
great. Teach us more about it, though, Becca, because I feel like I know. No, nothing, actually. I was reaching
I know what
for
Tarantino
facts.
thinks, but that's...
Sorry?
I know what Tarantino thinks, but that's all I...
Yes, yeah, we'll post a link to that, because I hadn't even actually heard of that. I'm familiar with what Tarantino thinks about Hitchcock, but that particular podcast that you mentioned, I don't think I've heard of it before, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is part of a much longer episode, so he does like an hour and a half interview. The clip Becca gave us, which had another link to the full thing, was only 4 or 5 minutes, but that's all I'm trying to say. And it's not a desperate attempt to defend Tarantino, because you can think whatever you like of him, but just be aware. Look, there was always this enfant terrible. He's a bloody filmmaker with loads of violence and all the rest of it, which isn't quite true. He's not saying Hitchcock should have been that. He's just saying he's constrained by the morals of the Hays Code. That's all. His storytelling choices more than his bloodiness.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just sort of, especially, it was just that time. It wasn't just him; it was other filmmakers as well. Kind of got a bit strung up, but there it is, and it's something that carried on until the 70s, really. We'll just do some tropes, because I haven't done that for a while, and then we'll do some factage. They probably won't be very facts, but never mind. So Hitchcock Blonde, we kind of haven't really got Blonde. It's Joan Fontaine. The cameo happens maybe 47 minutes in. He's posting a letter. You blink and you miss him. I'm not sure about that. There's obviously a staircase scene, so the famous scene of he's bringing Lena a glass of milk, which may or may not be poisoned, up this winding, expressionistic-looking staircase. I haven't finished up. I didn't clear out my facts from the previous film. Wrong man, character on the run aren't really applicable here. Johnny's kind of on the run from his various debts, but that's about it, really. Animals, are quite a few horses in this film, and also we see a Sealyham Terrier. The Sealyham in the film is one of Hitchcock's own, also called Johnny. Caused some confusion, I'm sure. Hitchcock's kept Sealyhams for years, and obviously the most famous cameo with him is in The Birds. Hitchcock was seen leaving the pet shop with 2 on a lead. As we mentioned before, the most iconic scene from this film is probably where he brings the glass of milk, which may or may not be poisoned. Obviously this was achieved. I think he had a glass fitted with a battery operated light, so that it kind of glowed ominously against the kind of dimly lit scene. A couple of factoids. There's been, fun fact number 1, there's been a few adaptations of this film. At the time, it was quite common and popular for films to be adapted for the radio, as we've probably mentioned on previous shows. And this was adapted like 5 or 6 times between 1942 and 1949. Although recently, I never knew this, and I watched it in prep for this film. But it was recently remade in 1987, 88 for American theatre and PBS in America. It's basically a made-for-TV movie, which I largely kind of made here in the UK, actually. Starring Anthony Andrews from Brideshead Revisited, and Jane Curtin, who I know from Third Rock from the Sun, but I think she was in in many other programmes prior to that.
Was she in Kate and Ali?
Probably, actually,
Or have I got mixed up with somebody else? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but she's really good.
Picture the actress you mean.
Yeah, Jane Curtin, definitely. Also stars really early roles for British actors Martin Clunes, obviously Doc Martin, and I think it's the small screen debut of Jeremy Northam, who is quite popular for a while for playing sort of romantic kind of leading roles, certainly here on British TV. But I'd never heard of that remake before. It's available to watch on YouTube. It's okay. It's quite well made, I would say, but it's just a bit unnecessary. And because they're not old, but they are meant to be like a little bit older, I will say. So it's quite interesting dynamic as well. But I mean, if you want to, you can check it out. It's interesting, that remake, but it's a bit like the Psycho remake. It's quite really interesting, but slightly unnecessary. Fun fact number 2. This is one of 4 collaborations, I think, between Hitchcock and Franz Waxman. We need to get Charlie on to talk about the music. But the other 3 being obviously Rebecca, The Paradigm Case, and Red Window, and then this one. Fun fact number 4. I've done the one about the milk already. It's Hitchcock's first credit as a producer as well as a director. And then my final fun fact: Joan Fontaine won the Oscar for this film, perhaps well deserved, as she didn't win for Rebecca the previous year. So 1941 was the first year there was no first-time Best Actress nominees, which is quite interesting, I think. Obviously, at the top of the show, we mentioned Leo G. Carroll also appeared in Rebecca, this film, Spellbound, Paradigm Case, Strangers on the Train, and North by Northwest. And obviously the other Cary Grant Hitchcock films, obviously this one, Notorious, To Catch a Thief, and also North by Northwest. So I thought I'd just give those a mention. So yeah, this is it.
Thank you. As for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter, although I'm using that a bit less at the moment, and there's no political point in this. We're going to carry on using X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of people. We're
now on Blue Sky.
We're now on Blue Sky, and I'll let Becca tell you where that is in a minute. I am at the Pasty Kid on there, and again, it's just that'll be my usual place of choice, because so many people I talk to me or of interest to me have just gone to there. But we're not abandoning X. I'm still there as well. But talk to me on Blue Sky. I'm still on X. So, Chris.
You can find me on X, or find all the old podcasts on I've forgotten now, on Podbean. Yes, you can find them all on Podbean.
Yes, and you can find us basically anywhere you pick up your podcasts. You can support us in any one of 3 methods: listening to us, thank you very much for your time, subscribing to us, and leaving a 5-star review on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Wherever you find us, don't forget to rate, review, to like and share on your podcatcher of choice. You can find us on Facebook, Do Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on Twitter, X, at Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on YouTube, Do Expect Us to Talk. And you can now find us on Blue Sky. Just search Do Expect Us to Talk, you'll find us on there. And also Apple Podcast, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you get your podcatchers. I should probably say, or wherever you download your podcast.
No, that's all right. Okay, so that's us done, I think. Becca, I think this will, I say I'd be surprised. We did chat about it earlier, but I can't remember what we decided. What's next, Becca?
Do Expect to Talk will return with Saboteur.